Let me welcome all of you to another session of Stop by My Office, starting your very own consulting practice. I've invited Sean Hale to give us 10 or 15 minutes on the key elements of starting your own practice. But I think what we'll do is we'll first start by going around the room. Sue, are you here on video? Sue Gardner?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with my camera. I'll keep working on it.
Okay, Tim? Again,
Yep,
we're
I'm
it'll be cozier if we all have our cameras on, if you don't mind. There you go, Sue. That's good enough.
Okay, now I can't see you
My
guys.
face is a little blurred sometimes too. No worries. Sharon Kaiser, if you hopefully everybody is comfortable turning on their cameras. All right, so we're going to have a group discussion on starting your own consulting practice. Sean Hale has very kindly agreed to give us a few minutes on his ideas on what the key elements are. But why don't we go around the room first? Sean, you'll go last since you're a presenter. Got one more person joining us. I think this is a big enough group. So Dominic, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your 90-second pitch. Dominic?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead. Just give us your 90-second pitch.
Thank you.
Who are you? How can we help you?
My name is Dominic Del Rosso. I'm a senior finance executive or controller in the manufacturing industry. I am currently looking for I can help companies make their data more accessible and usable.
Okay. Have you started a consulting practice? Or you're just thinking about it?
No, sir, I have not. I'm exploring my options at this point.
Good. Okay. It's a good thing to do. John Vitelli?
In the FENG since about 1999. This past June, I retired after about 47 years working in finance and business administration in the not-for-profit and higher education sectors. For the past 23 years, I've worked as a CFO and vice president for finance and administration for a large library system in New York City, a science university in Philadelphia, with an emphasis on pharmacy, and a traditional liberal arts school here in New Jersey, Liberal Arts University. I've thoroughly enjoyed retirement and expect to continue retiring, enjoying it, especially with a new granddaughter. But I'm also looking for a creative outlet that'll allow me to continue working part-time. So I'm seriously exploring owning a consulting practice for not-for-profit and higher education organizations, and including today's discussion as part of my information gathering.
Good. Well, that's a niche that needs a lot of help these days.
Sure.
John Eisner, you want to give us your pitch? Can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Just like the commercial. Hello, everybody. My name is John Peisner, and I'm the founder of Value Creation, Value Protection, LLC, a brand new consulting company that I started after a career of doing investor relations and enterprise risk management just for public companies, primarily in the auto space. I've got extensive experience raising capital, over $5 billion in capital raises, $4 billion of M&A, have built investor relations programs and enterprise risk management programs from the ground up. And I'm just here networking, and I'll give a plug to my friend Sean. He and I had coffee this morning, and just emphasizes the value of the FENG and the networking and the benefits you can get.
Oh, thank you. Tim, Swimmer?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. My situation is very similar to John's. I recently retired, longtime FENG member, 40 plus years, Big Four and CFO work. Most recently, I spent 17 years as CFO of a biopharmaceutical company. Did an IPO, ultimately sold the company. And so I'm really at the point of again, recently retired and now looking, does starting some type of a consulting business make sense?
Oh, good. Okay. Sue Gardner, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think I'm in a similar situation to John and Tim. I recently retired. I was a VP of finance, primarily in financial services, mostly recently insurance industry. I've been a member of FENG for a long time, participated on the resume review committee for probably, I don't know, a good 10 or 15 years. And because I just recently retired, I'm just kind of sticking my toe in the water to see if I want to get into consulting. I had a consulting company about 20 years ago, but I know a lot of things have changed in that time frame.
Sure. Sharon,
Hi, my background. Can you hear me okay?
we can hear you. Is your camera available?
No, it isn't.
Okay, no worries.
So my background is very similar to several of the other speakers. I retired a couple of years ago after 40 plus years, first in public accounting and then as a CFO for a couple of smaller companies, a few startups, did an IPO. I always really enjoyed what I did. And then when I retired, I was going to be doing consulting. That was my plan. And then COVID came along and I kind of dropped that during the COVID period. And now I'm trying to decide which direction I want to go. I certainly do not want to do a full-time job again. And I'm just kind of trolling for ideas from other folks here.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, this is a good place to troll. Jolan, I don't know what your real name is. And your camera's not on, so. And you're muted. Jolan, I don't know who you are. Well, I don't want to waste our time today. I don't know if you're listening in or stepped away. Sean, why don't you take it away? We have primarily people today who have recently retired and they have transferable skills. So what would you say for someone who isn't really perhaps planning to build a full-blown consulting practice? What do you think the key elements are?
Well, Matt, thank you for inviting me to do a quick presentation today. And the 2 generations ago of this presentation was actually done for a organization of people who are retired or close to retirement who are having to get back into the job industry. So some of this stuff actually has a serendipitous extra lining up. So I'm Sean Hale. I've been doing nonprofit nuts and bolts for more than 20 years. So before becoming an independent consultant 2 years ago, I spent 4 years at Mission Capital, which is a nonprofit capacity builder here in Austin, Texas. And over the last 2 years, and especially in the last 12 months, I've seen my consulting business really build up so much so that I recently added my 6th affiliate, and I'm anticipating adding as many as 4 in Q1 of next year. But anyway, I've been asked to present a little bit about some of what I've learned about setting up your consulting practice.
You froze for a second. It's probably my connection, Sean. We'll give Sean a minute. Can everybody hear me? Oh, Sean, you broke up for just
Okay.
so just
Yeah, computer froze. Okay. If that
No,
happens again, I do have a second computer ready to go,
technology.
and I'll log in with that other computer if this one keeps on freaking out. So anyway, I built this deck partially based on my own experience as setting up a consulting practice, but also there's a side business a friend and I started during the pandemic to help nonprofits find the right consultant. So it's actually plugged me into a network of about 300, 400 different consultants. And so you'll see the brand Philanthroforce at the top of the deck, and that's what that's all about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, please.
Holler at me if anybody wants me to stop or anything like that. But otherwise, I'll go through the deck. I think it's going to take about 10, 15 minutes. And the idea is to give some basic thoughts and spark some conversation for everybody, right, Matt?
Yep, that's the idea.
Good. Can everybody see my screen?
It's blank at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, it's goofy on my end too. Oh, the doggone technology. Let's give it another second here.
There you go.
Oh, it's coming through for you. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
We just had Jeff Matthews join us. Sean's going to do a 10 or 15-minute piece on starting your own consulting practice, Jeff. So feel free to heckle from the peanut gallery.
Great. Well, let me get started. I can't see my deck, but I'm going to assume y'all can, since you just told me you could. Matt, thank you again for inviting me to share this, and already told you the context. So let's go on to slide 2. I'm going to be talking about technology with you for a moment, and I'm going to assume here that everybody here wants to at least replace the income that they had from their most recent full-time job, at least on an hourly basis, for those of you who might just want to do part-time. How we use technology says a lot about us to potential clients. For example, my son and I, we love classic cars, but that's not something I put front and center in what I do. If that's who you are, if that's who you want to be, like, I don't want to poo-poo it, but just I want to encourage you to be careful and intentional about the messages you are consciously and unconsciously sending in your use of technology. I happen to be based in Austin, Texas, and we do have somebody who just moved here who is literally going to the moon. So this is Elon Musk, he can tell people he's going to the moon and he's going in a rocket. Most of the rest of us, we also shouldn't misrepresent ourselves by saying we're going in a rocket, right? We should be honest and accurate. And so a lot of what I'm going to be telling you is about setting yourself up to send the message that you are a Honda, right? You're not a Model T Ford, you're not a rocket, but you're dependable, reliable, and contemporary. You're up to date, that you're comfortable with basic technology, and that you're ready and eager to go another 100,000 miles or whatever it happens to be in your particular case. So one key piece of this is your online presence. So your LinkedIn profile is important. Having a recent professional photo, content makes sense and be appealing and easy to read. A modern email address is important, folks. An AOL email address, for example, suggests that you are on the Model T Ford side of technology. And if that's where you are and you're okay with that, by all means, I don't want to tell you to misrepresent, but a Gmail email address does not suggest that. And if you go another step and get your own domain with your own URL, and so it's like mine is Sean@seanhale.org, that tells potential clients that you are serious and that you are committed to consulting, not just testing the waters. Now, they're a whole lot more likely to go with somebody who they think is serious versus somebody who's testing the waters. Setting up your own website is also something that is a lot easier to do than it was 20 years ago. I built mine in a day. It doesn't have to be perfect on day one. You just need something there because this is your digital calling card. And this is another way for you to signal that you are serious about being a consultant. You're not just testing the waters. And you can do that.
For a second here,
Yeah.
Sean. Everybody should understand that it's very we're appealing to everybody's inner accountant. It's very inexpensive to do all these things today. You can set up your own URL, I believe, for like $200. You can secure it. And if you go with any of the major services like GoDaddy. They will help you put up a 1 or 2 or 3-page website.
Yeah, for $200 on Squarespace, you can get your URL and actually have the space, the page and the hosting. Or you can pay a college student or something like that if you're really daunted by the technology. But Squarespace is easy to use. I've heard good things about Wix also. And of course, the other thing I would add is just there may very well be online directories of people with your specialty and your niche. And so seek those out and get visibility on those. If you happen to be in the nonprofit space, I have to encourage you to use Philanthroforce because, hey, I'm a co-founder of it. Thinking about other services that you might want to need as you're getting started, Canva is a great one. It's great for beautiful business cards. That's how I got mine done. For stock photos, they have a bunch of great free stock photos and inexpensive ones. Graphic design, I know somebody who actually is in the boomer generation who does lovely graphic design, even though she is very far from tech savvy. Canva makes it easy. So if you need to do graphics, it's just a great way to do it. Top Resume is another service I'll throw out there. I paid them, I think $150, $200. And they looked over my resume, looked over my LinkedIn posting, and gave me a lot of recommendations. I ended up going with about 80% of them. A little bit of it was junk, but a lot of it was really good things that helped me up my game with my resume and my LinkedIn profile. Technology tools. If you are not on top of these tools yet, I would really encourage you to block out some time and play with them, get some experience. Zoom, you should be familiar with that because a lot of the business you'll get to do these days can be via Zoom. That's going to let you be open to more customers, not just the ones who are in your neighborhood. Google Calendar is a way that you're going to be scheduling a lot of things. And again, this is a way that you are signaling your comfort and your capacity with technology. If you're making appointments with something like Google Zoom or Outlook, that's really going to signal that you are at least contemporary with technology. And Calendly is a good way to go a step above. It's a neat little tool, an inexpensive service. I think the most basic version is actually free, but it basically lets other people book time on your calendar without you having to exchange 10 emails about when you're going to meet. Like, are you available Friday at 4? How about Saturday at 10? It takes care of that for you without revealing any personal details. It just shows them that you have these hours available for a meeting. So next thing
in here again, just to appeal to everybody's inner accountant, an entry-level paid Zoom account is only $150.
Yeah, and actually there's a free version too. It just cuts you off at like 45 minutes, right? But
right,
the good stuff.
That's not very professional.
True. And yeah, you can't go you're not going to look good for your
Well,
clients.
ran out of time.
Yeah, not a good
Sorry.
look.
Go ahead.
So speaking of money, and not just because we're money people, but it's because on people's minds, personal finances are an important piece of this whole puzzle, right? It's a part of the equation. Taxes are something we need to think about, right? Because we're going to be taxed differently from the way we were before. And in fact, as you're getting started, you may not even be, having to do like quarterly filings and things like that. And so the rule of thumb that I've seen out there is 25%. I am cautious with those things. I've been stocking aside 35% just to be on the safe side. But the point is, put aside money for your taxes because you're not going to have an employer taking them out for you. Savings is another key thing, and expect to go through some on your first year unless you're in a position where you're just starting consulting as a side gig while you're still employed full time. Another thing to be thinking about is how you're going to set your rate, right? And set a target. A W-2 is a good place to at least start your thinking about that, right? How much are you making over a year? Turn that into hours. Add 50 to 100% more to whatever your hourly rate was, because now you're not going to be charging your clients for business development, for benefits, for vacation time, for professional development, all that kind of stuff. Now that's your hour. You're not going to charge that out to your clients. And so your rate needs to reflect that so that when you're actually billing somebody, it's because you're working directly on that business for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can interrupt you for just a second here, a very simple model for setting your rate. Sean is on the right track. If you take your annual salary, divide by 250, that's a day rate, divide by 8, that's an hourly rate. There's no benefits, okay? So you add at least 15% to that. And then understand that's what everybody who puts people out on assignment has to charge their clients. They have to pay you, like Robert Half and so forth. They have to pay you that kind of a number. Your annual salary divided by 250 divided by 8. They have to pay you that. And then they put their markup on it. Robert Half, for example, pays out 45%. So to Sean's point, Robert Half is an umbrella over your rate. If they hired somebody at your level, they would have to pay you that, and they would charge the client double. Okay, Sean, continue.
Yeah, thank
really
you.
good points here.
So, I would just set a target and work towards it. And, you're also going to be eventually taking supply and demand into account, right? As we all know, like if there are too many people knocking down your door and you don't want to take more business, that's time to bump up your rate. You may want to put a discount on your early gigs. There are different schools of thought on that. I certainly wouldn't do a long-term commitment at a bargain basement price, but that's one way to at least get started. If it's important for you to get experience, if it's important for you to say, hey, I have these other clients, that sort of thing. I have just 2 more slides here, I think, 2 or 3. The next one is the business model canvas. If you're not familiar with this, this is a great tool. Just Google it, business model canvas. It's a great way to help figure out what is your niche. I've used it before. I've had friends use it before. You do not have to get this perfect. It can be a work in progress. You don't even need to get it all done, but it's a great way over a couple of just hours for you to really think through things like, who are my key partners? What are my key activities? What's my value proposition? The cost structure, all that kind of thing. Once you have a draft, go out for coffee with a friend who will give you frank, honest feedback, kick it around. But again, treat it as a work in progress, not something you need to get perfect before you get out there and start consulting. If you have people who are ready to hire you today, go and start working with them, because you're never going to get your business model canvas perfect. And the last important point in my deck for today is networking. This is still really key. This is a lot of what the FANG is about. And so your old coworkers, old clients, if you have old clients, right, they're going to be helpful for new gigs, and you want them to remember you and somebody when you need to ask them for a reference, right? Your friends, going out and having coffee or beers or whatever it is that you do with your friends, reestablishing, refreshing those relationships so they know what you're up to. Other consultants can be very helpful for mutual support, like the FANG is, to share ideas and best practices, because there's regularly new technology coming on. Like, what do you think about Sage Intacct? What do you think about NetSuite? Whatever it is, that kind of information can be really important to get that from another consultant who's in the same space. Those relationships with other consultants are also really important for collaborating on big gigs. For when you don't have the full skill set or you don't have the full time, it's really good to know there's somebody else you can call on and say, hey, can you come in as a subcontractor on this? Because the client needs this done by March 1st. And I think between the two of us, we can knock it out of the park, right? So, folks, that's it. I think Matt will guide the conversation, but, certainly.
Well, you've given us some good places to start, Sean. Thank you.
Great. So
there
there you have it.
Pick up on a few of Sean's points and we can discuss them. One point I make in these sessions is, and Sean touched on it, is getting started. A lot of people want to keep polishing the rock. Don't. Okay. We actually live in an Etch-a-Sketch world now. And by that, I mean, everything can be fixed. 30 years ago, if you started your own consulting practice, everybody would print a trifold. There's garages across America filled with trifolds. No one uses them anymore. But the point is, nothing is fixed anymore. If you put up a website, they do it in WordPress or some related program now, and you can go in every day if you want to and fix your copy on your website. The goal is to get the website up so that you have a URL. Once you got it up, you can just keep fixing it. The misconception is people talk about hanging out their own shingle. Well, if you've never sent anybody to your website, it's never going to get this. It's not going to get discovered. So if it's up there and it's wrong, it doesn't really matter because nobody's going there. Okay, so you can fix it. The important thing is to get started. We can talk a little bit about, let's see, so couple things. I like that other consultants. Competition is kind of a misnomer these days. Everyone on this call does something a little different. So, meeting people, other people who are doing consulting, I think you need to get yourself past that. You'll find out about more stuff talking to other people who do what you do than if you try to hide things that you're doing. You have to be open. And when you're open, people will talk to you and you'll find out about stuff. So sources of business. Jeff has an established consulting practice. I'll let you weigh in here in a minute, but I want to make the point that is similar to networking, and that is that the most likely people who will give you work are people who know you. It's that simple, duh. Okay. So, and Sean picked up on this. If you talk to people who you've worked with before, or you talk to people who know you, you do the John Smith thing, Thanksgiving. You ask people if they know anybody that they can introduce you to who will understand what you do. It's just that simple. In actual fact, they may say, well, I have a few projects. Okay, but you don't want to be asking people directly, right? Would you agree with that, Sean?
Yeah, as much as there's a part of me that's an idealist and that, wants everybody to get the stuff that they're merited and you can just sit back and wait for them to come to you, they're not. And so it's about relationships. And almost all of my work has come that way.
It's all from people you know. Jeff, you want to weigh in here? Jeff is, he looks normal in every other respect, but he worked for B2B CFO for a while.
Yeah, I worked for B2B CFO for 7 years, and I've been out on my own for a couple of years.
I know you have.
All these things are really important. I think the networking, I set an objective for myself early on that I would have 3 networking meetings a day. It's easy to do more than that if you're going to do them electronically on Zoom. I think I've got 4 tomorrow. It's just,
wow.
You've got to get out and meet people and get to know them. It may take 2 or 3 meetings to develop a contact. There are a lot of good resources. We've all come across a lot of bankers in our career, and bankers are a wonderful resource for this kind of consulting practice because they have some visibility into the inner workings of the finance areas of the company. So they are good leads. Wealth managers are decent leads. So are commercial insurance brokers. I have not found the CPA firms to be all that friendly. They want to compete with you when it's convenient for them. And the attorneys, some can be a good referral, but a lot of them are really afraid to make any kind of referrals. If something goes wrong, they'll get blamed. So they don't want to create that scenario.
Yeah. About the best, as a consultant, you're hoping somebody will introduce you to one of their clients because they have a good relationship with them. But if you follow the money, the best that's going to happen here is they won't lose their client. They're not going to make any money from it. So they're at risk, and they, to Jeff's point, they will pretend to be helpful, but they're really not going to be. The bankers, I think, have a vested interest. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate on that.
Well, sure they do. And they look at you as a source of referrals, because if you get to work with somebody who you realize can restructure their debt or needs some financing, growing, whatever the scenario is, you're going to refer to the people that you've got a better relationship with. And sometimes that tests the relationship to see whether they really have the kind of appetite that they were kind of inferred that they did. So,
yeah. So, for those of you who are looking at this as kind of retirement income, if you're in business and you have a lot of volume, you need insurance. If you're just, piddling with a few things, I think it's a risk worth taking because insurance can be pricey. I have currently 4 people out on assignment through the FECG. I carry a lot of insurance. Okay. because I'm not controlling these people. And people can sue you for any reason or no reason at all. And I'm a little risk adverse. But if you're just doing your own stuff, that's one thing you could probably put off for a while. What do you think, Jeff? Or Sean, you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I just made a note that I need to add Hiscox Insurance to my deck and LLC, your LLC.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't you touch on that for a second, Sean? What business forms? Sole proprietorship?
Yeah, you can go out, as I understand it, and I'm not an expert in this, but you can go out and start selling business now, but then you and your personal assets are liable, right? Which is why you want to set up a corporation. An LLC is the quick and easy way to do it, and it's easier for filing with your taxes and whatnot. And I'm in the process of switching over to an S corp because once you hit a certain level of revenue, it just makes more sense from a tax perspective to get set up as an S corp. There's a little bit more paperwork and stuff to do, but there's an inflection point. I think it was around $80,000 or $100,000, something like that, they told me. And so there's an outfit that I'm familiar with that will like do it all for you. I happen to like have my fingers in the details, so I have somebody local who's doing it. But yeah, and then there's Hiscox Insurance. You can sign up with them online. They were recommended to me by an insurance agent friend, so really easy to get signed up with and easy to work with. Also, I called them up in August and said, hey, like business is going up. I have all these affiliates now, and they doubled my rate, but it's still really, really affordable. So now it's like, I'm paying $70-$80 a month, and it was $40-$50 a month when I got started. So really affordable.
That's for E&O?
That's E&O, yes.
Yeah, good. Oh, that's good.
And you guys all know how to buy insurance, but I'm carrying $1 million worth of liability insurance. I'm carrying some general liability insurance. You need to review your auto insurance policy to make sure if something happens when you're traveling. I'm spending about $1,800 a year on insurance.
Yeah, and it's important to do. But again, you don't have to do that initially if you're just testing the waters. I think the most important factor to focus on is finding assignments. You need the tools, right? You need a URL, you need a small website, you need business cards if we ever get back in front of people directly. What else? I assume you have a phone, you have a laptop, you have a printer, you have a scanner, the basic tools, you have those anyway. So you're off.
I gave out a business card today. When I was having coffee with John, I bumped into somebody I knew from a former life, and he was very excited about leaving his current job, especially when I told him what I was up to. And so I said, hey, you have a card? So yeah, here you go.
You can't make them on demand. You've got to have some kind of business card. And they're, for $50, you can get decent looking business cards. It's none of these things anymore are a huge investment. We live in a great time. And I think another thing to keep in mind is that you can work remotely for most of your clients. 20 years ago, it was not as possible. Nowadays, even small companies are using QuickBooks Online. Even when they're in the office, right? They're using the online version because the boss is traveling and he wants to get in and look at stuff. So you can get in and look at stuff once they give you access, and you don't even have to go into the office. Pretty amazing times.
Another couple of things I would suggest is you may want a VPN, virtual private network, is part of your technology suite to make sure that you're protected if you're out in the Panera or something like that, trying to log in. There's software, you mentioned logging in. Almost all my clients today are on some sort of a cloud-based software, but I'm still paying for desktop because I'll occasionally get a file. Somebody wants me to work with them and they're sending me a file, and I want to have the desktop version. So I use QuickBooks for my own business as well.
Yeah. And it's not, again, none of this stuff is all that expensive. And if you have it, you have the tools to service your clients. I have my consulting practice is QuickBooks Online. The FENG's actually on my desktop because I don't let anybody else touch the book, so I don't need to share files. But to Jeff's point, I could take somebody else's QuickBooks file and take a look at it if they wanted to send it to me. As I tell people, I don't do any real work anymore. I have other people doing it. So questions, Sue, John, why don't you join us and tell us what your questions are. John, go ahead.
Up on some of the housekeeping suggestions. I like the idea about insurance and setting up, say, an LLC. What about other things such as separate bank account, a business bank account, a business credit card? I mean, is that the type of thing you do right up front to segregate spending and revenue, or do you just sort of segue into that and depending on the level of income you've got?
I think if you have an LLC, you probably should have a separate bank account for it. John, Jeff, what do you think?
I deposit all monies that are associated with billing into my business bank account. And I did it at the same institution where I keep my personal stuff so I can transfer money if I need to, but it flows into the company. So there's no question, again, you're back to liability. If you're taking checks from customers and depositing them in your own account, that's where the money flows.
Yeah. So let me just weigh in here on the FECG is mostly, well, I have 4 people out on assignment. So I'm getting client money in. And my business methodology is I always ask for a 3-week retainer for people I have out on assignment because I never front the cash for my consultants. And my simple business process is my candidates who are out on assignment send me their hours for the preceding week on Sunday. Monday morning, I do my billing. And as soon as I finish my billing, I pay them. Now, if I wasn't holding cash, I couldn't pay them. So to the point about separate bank accounts, John, I would never put that money into my personal bank account. That would be wrong. I mean, I have a business partner, Bruce Lynn, but if I was a sole practitioner with an LLC, it would still be smart to have a separate bank account. Again, these are things that don't cost that much.
Hey, Matt, I'm just curious, what's the magic, why you ask for 3 weeks retainer? And just some perspective, I had, like one of the other people on the call, I had a consulting practice 20 years ago, and I would bill after a month, and the bill was due upon receipt and payment was expected. I never had an issue like within 10 business days.
Right. So 2 things. Number one, I agree with you. All my invoices say due upon receipt. I had 6 business partners when I started, and I had been in the staffing business for 5 months back in '91. So these are things that I picked up from that assignment. When I say I was in the staffing business, I was CFO of a staffing company. Okay, and that was their business method, was to take retainers. So you ask why, if you bill people a retainer, now they are either serious or they're not serious. So if they're serious, they'll give you money to work against. So they give you a 1-month retainer. At the end of the month, you send them an invoice to replenish the retainer. That's the way I would do it. And then you're just kind of working down the hours that they've prepaid for. It's in my view, it's a smarter way to do business. Sean, Jeff, you can weigh in here. I don't know what you're doing with your clients.
I agree. I've been transitioning.
You don't have to
that.
tell us, by the way. You're not.
No. I'm happy to share. Yeah, I've been transitioning into that. I started off doing less of that. I was kind of too timid. Didn't have the benefit of this group of peers to bounce ideas around with. So yeah, no, great idea.
Yeah. So let me share with you the thought process here. The reality of consulting assignments is the client has an emergency. If they didn't have an emergency, believe me, they wouldn't hire you. So You know, you got them where you want them. As one of my professors once said, it's not American to kick a man when he's down, but name a better time. Okay, you got them where you want them. If they don't send you a check, you don't show up for work and deal with their crisis. It's a great place to be. Sean?
Or the other side of that coin is they're more than likely they're reaching out to you because they're in a tight spot. And that also means that you don't want to be holding the bag if that tight spot puts them in a position where they're not paying people.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And in my world, I have people out on assignment who are, well, two things. Number one, they're expecting that I'm collecting from the client. But I have the advantage that I have them in there as either the CFO or the controller. And I always tell my candidates, your first job on Monday afternoon is to see whether they've booked my invoice. Because if they don't pay me, I don't pay you. Like hanging in the morning, it tends to focus the mind. Just smart business. And again, you got them where you want them. They have some desperate problem or they wouldn't bring you in. So you don't have to feel bad. And they understand, you know, you're not working for free. And that way you don't have to worry about your money. You know, if after the month is over, they haven't paid, reimbursed that retainer, don't show up for work. Believe me, if you don't show up for work, they will overnight a check to you or they'll ACH the money into your account. They will. Because again, as a consultant, you're dealing with a crisis. And they either want to get it done or they don't.
I think part of the
Jeff, you want to weigh in
retainer,
here?
I think part of the retainer logic has to do with the extent of the engagement too.
Sure.
Most of the engagements I'm involved in, I'm billing on an hourly basis. I'm now at a month, I bill on the last day of the month and give them 10 days to pay. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best. When I started out, I billed every week and I still gave them 1 week to pay. But what I'm doing is often on an hourly basis. So knowing how many hours they would need to give me as a depositor or retainer is tough. I do have one engagement right now that's total contingency. And the reason I'm doing that is because the owner doesn't have enough money to front this, but it's an acquisition. If the acquisition goes through, I'm going to have 6-figure income next year just from that transaction. But it's a gamble on my part. That's not a good way to start out. I'm willing to take a flyer on this one.
You know, and let's keep in mind here, if you're given what all of us do for a living, which is being either a CFO or a controller, as soon as the company gives you access to their books, if you find out they have no money, I would either ask for money or not show up for work anymore. You have no, you know, generally speaking, you're not dealing with a client where you own a part of the equity. So if they have no cash and they're not paying anybody, they're not going to pay you either. They're going to say, oh, you understand, we don't have any money. Well, you know what? I don't have any money either. I've got to buy toys for my boat. I need money. So I'm not going to.
Jeff, I had a follow-up for you since you're an hourly biller and I did that a million years ago. How do you quote unquote count an hour? Is 15 minutes of time in month end clicks, is that an hour? Does it depend on, are they a long-term client, short-term client? I'm sure there's a lot of variables, but maybe you could discuss
Good
that.
questions, John. Good question. So, and Sean and Jeff, you can weigh in here, but I ask my consultants to keep track of their hours, but also what they're doing. You know, when you're a W-2, you're being paid to show up. As a consultant, you're being paid to work. Okay, you're on the clock. So to John's point, yes, I think 15-minute increments is appropriate. It doesn't have to be to the minute. You know, 15-minute increments is perfect. But you need to keep track of what you're doing because somebody might ask. And when you submit your timesheets, you want to give them some detail of what you worked on. Because 3 weeks from now, believe me, you won't remember. So contemporaneously, you want to keep track of that stuff. Jeff, you want to,
Yeah, I tend to,
I think maybe
tend
Tim
to be
has
a
a
little
question. Go
generous.
ahead.
I tend to be a little generous. I do bill in 15-minute increments. But I'm just, I'd rather them feel like I'm not nitpicking them for hours. And so like I had a long-term contract or long-term customer that I worked with for 6 years. And I typically would give them 5, maybe even 5.5 hours. It was basically a morning engagement, but I often showed up at 7. So I was, and not leave until noon. So I was giving them 5 hours and billing them for half a day rate effectively.
Yeah. And, you know, if any travel's involved, the general rule is travel, if you're traveling on behalf of a client, you get your half your hourly rate. You can work out any deal you want with people, but, you know, if you're traveling on their behalf somewhere, you can't, that is somewhat billable time. But generally, you wouldn't bill them the full rate. That's just, you know, best practice, but you can do what you want. So we should talk for a few minutes since some of you are new to, oh, Tim has a question. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah.
Tim.
Actually, Matt, thanks. I've got 2 questions. One, those of you who are actively engaged in consulting today, do most of you use consulting engagement letters, contracts? And my second question is just briefly talk about the LLC process of getting that set up, how you went about that.
All right, well, let's start with engagement letters. Anybody I have out on assignment, I have responsibilities to the consultant. So I have contracts with the client and I have contracts with the consultant, which simply states the terms. Don't do any 5-page contracts because they don't get signed. You do something simple and it'll get signed, and you want a signed contract, okay? And Jeff and Sean, you can weigh in here on that. The LLC, I don't know what element you'd like to talk about.
Just how to go about setting that up.
Where are you, Tim? What state?
Michigan.
Okay. I'm sure it's not difficult to set up an LLC. They try to make it very simple. And usually there's just a couple $100 registration fee. It's not a complicated process. If it's a 1-person LLC, I don't think you even need an agreement. And if you have business partners, yeah, you want to have an agreement. But if it's just you, Sean, Jeff, I don't know if either of you have business partners.
Yeah, I've done both. And yeah, the LLC is easy peasy here in Texas, where I'm based. We can do it online through the Secretary of State's website, and it's not like they are, you know, technology leaders. And so I would imagine Michigan and everybody else's states would have that option as well. And yeah, once you have partners and that, then there are other levels, and it's, I think, more of a checkbox on the form when you're registering, but you want that for your own protection, that, you know, everybody gets, you know, 500 shares or whatever and all that other mishigas, because you don't want to figure that out after you have the partnership.
Yeah.
You know,
Jeff?
just to play upon what Sean said, I'm here in Austin too, and you should check in Michigan. I'm a former resident. If they have regular filing or expedited. I did a regular filing. I didn't pay the extra $100 to have it expedited, and it was over 2 months. And when I called the Secretary of State, they said, you should have done the expedited. So you should just see if there's an expedite. I don't know how quick or slow Michigan is, but if you can pay an extra 50 or $100 to get it in a week versus 2 or 3 months, I would jump on that.
And there are some complications if you have partners. In Connecticut, they implemented a pass-through entity tax. It's the most ridiculous thing in the entire world, because when you file your state of Connecticut tax return, all the money you pay into the state of Connecticut for your LLC, they let you deduct on your tax return. All they've done is enrich my tax accountant. John? You're muted, John. Sorry. You're still muted. Ah, there you go.
I imagine, along with all of this, you want to get an employee identification number with the IRS.
Yes.
Yeah, if you have an LLC, you need, I went to an attorney. I was already a six-figure practice when I went out on my own, but I went to the attorney, had him draw it up. I had him draw up my contract, and I basically told him his contract was ugly. So, and this is something I learned from B2B CFO. The proposal and the contract are one and the same for what B2B does and the way I do it. I stepped down, and you probably don't like this, Matt, but my last contract I had was a 6-page contract. Now the first one's just a cover page, but I walked through a summary of who they were, a proposal, a timeline, compensation structure, terms and termination rights, independent contractor status, confidentiality. Something I learned from B2B, I've got an entire page on just things I won't do, so that there's no confusion about being an independent contractor, not being an officer of the company. And then a little bit of legal language about governing laws and, partial agreements and those kind of things. But you don't want your contract to be ugly, in my opinion, but you do want it to cover everything the lawyers tell you need to cover.
Yeah, but you want to keep it simple so it gets signed. That's the key.
Yeah. I always walk into a
Dense
proposal
type
meeting.
contract, sometimes they don't get signed, and it's an emergency and you're working for them, and suddenly you turn around and realize they didn't sign the contract.
I tend to give the first meeting, the introductory meeting, away. Then I walk in with my proposal. I don't want to walk out unless I've got a signed copy and they have a signed copy of the agreement. So
Good. Okay.
if you do it electronically, you can run into a lot higher risk of not getting it back.
Yeah. So let me pick up on a point Jeff just made, which is, as a consultant, you are not an officer of the company. Do not sign anything. You have to submit papers to the bank. Do not put your name on it. You're just an advisor to the company. If you meet,
I also
you have to
don't
make
use
it
their
clear that
email
you're not
system.
an officer. You can weigh in here, that you're not an officer of the company. Jeff?
Yeah, I also, and that's in my contract language, but I also don't use their email. I've had a situation where they insisted I have an email, but I always just routed it into my Outlook and responded out of my own URL, so that I didn't have a situation where I was creating an appearance of being an officer. I've got legal language underneath my signature that says I'm not an employee, and just covering them, both of us. But I did have one situation where I was getting into a lot of stuff that got close to legal, and I just asked them to add me as an additional insured on their policy. So I was on their errors and omissions policy as an additional insured, and I had my own policy.
No, that's smart. Yeah, that's something that came up at our last meeting too. If you have a client and they have E&O, they can put you down as a named insured. And if you're doing a lot of work for them, that'd be a smart thing to ask for. Let me just mention one thing that I learned from my business experience. In the 1980s, I was chief financial officer of an advertising agency. And one of the things I learned, it's a personal service business, just like having your own consulting practice. And that is, don't work with people you dislike. It's never, never, never worth it. Okay. And especially for those of you who are looking at this as some kind of segue into retirement, you don't need the aggravation. If you at all get a sense that these are people who are not your people, run, do not walk. It just never pays. Jeff, I don't know, you want to weigh in here?
You don't always know when you're dancing at the beginning, but yeah,
Right.
it's it's always a good idea. If you don't trust them, if you don't think they're ethical, get away.
Yeah, oh, absolutely then. But also if they're disagreeable people, that you just don't need the aggravation. Our goal is to help you live longer and have a little pin money. There's no sense letting people drag you down. My son has a web design business, and over the years, he's been doing a lot of billing with ornery clients. And, they just burn him out. You send them a bill, they nitpick you on all the items of the bill. You just don't need that kind of aggravation. I don't care how much money they're paying you. And especially if you're building up a consulting practice at this point in your career, I hope you have some spare cash and you don't really need the money, right? So work with people you like. And as I mentioned earlier, talk to people who know you and that you like and ask them for referrals. Some of them will give you business with them, right? They are probably in your niche, whether that's manufacturing or in John's case, not for profit. And they'll have things that need to be done. There may not be a lot, I say this all the time to people, there may not be a lot of jobs in the world, but there's sure a lot of work that needs to be done. And jobs, I mean W-2 jobs. There's a lot of problems in the world, and they all require seasoned, experienced people to solve. So you talk to some people they'll say, gosh, maybe you can just come in here one day a week and I'll give you a pile of stuff to fix. And before you know it, you've got enough money that you're happy. That's all you would intended to accomplish. You don't want to give up any of your golf course time or your tennis time, right? This is just some extra, not in Jeff's case. Jeff and I have, we kind of have our own businesses and we're trying to earn a living from it. But you don't want to get involved with people who are unethical, to Jeff's point. And to my point, you don't want to deal with people who are constantly aggravating you. It's never worth it. I don't care how much money is involved. It's just never worth it. So we're drawing to an end here. Anybody have any other questions? Tim, Sue?
Yeah, I do have one question. Just on what we're just talking about not working with anyone you don't like. Let's say you start an assignment or engagement, whatever, and you have a signed contract and you realize, this isn't just going to work out. Do you have a termination clause in the engagement letter?
Jeff?
My termination clause basically says they can fire me at any time and I can leave at any time.
Okay.
I don't try to tie them down, and I don't want to be tied down if I don't want to be there.
Yeah. If there is always the possibility that one of these assignments will segue into a W-2 type of work, might be a part-time W-2 job, right? The nice thing about consulting, to the point Jeff just made, is that when you're a consultant and they know you can bolt at any time, they're very nice to you. Okay, and those behaviors continue when they hire you on a W-2. That's just the way they've been dealing with you, right? They forget that you're now an employee and they can abuse you. They forget about that part. So it's very nice. One of my models is try out the permanent. So these are not people who are trying to start their own consulting practice, but I put people in on temporary assignments. The client finds all kinds of things for them to do, and oftentimes hires them on a full-time basis. They find out how useful they are. Tim, do you have any other questions? We've hit 5 o'clock and meetings start and end on time in my world. John, anything else? I mean, you have a lot of business contacts, John, I'm sure. And you said that the not-for-profit world, the libraries, they're all reinventing themselves, John.
Yeah. I mean, I've just in my reaching out to colleagues who are either in consulting or who are in either of those sectors. There's a really nice blend of either interim positions, which sometimes includes some traveling, or just regionally. Higher ed is in such a mess that schools are really closing, and so there's a lot of work out there.
Yeah. All right, well, I want to thank all of you for, I don't know who Jalan is, but thank you for listening in. If you tell me who you are, I can add you to my mailing list. Otherwise, I can't. So just send me an email. Everybody has my email address. And I want to thank all of you for joining me, and Jeff especially, always coming in to lend his expertise to others. Very kind of you, Jeff. So everybody has the mailing list. I sent out the, when I send out the link to this meeting that I've recorded, I'll include another list of people. I've got three more names that I'm adding to the list. So thank you for joining us. And anytime you need me, I'm here to talk and help you do whatever you want to accomplish. Okay, so thank you, and everybody stay well.